Hello, fifth grade. We're back today with the Monsters of Morley Manor, and today we're going to read chapters 15 and 16. Now, in this book, let's double check. There are only 24 chapters, so we're getting kind of close to the end. So, today we're going to read 15 and 16. And the last time that we were reading, we were finally in the land of the dead, okay? And we know that that's kind of a interesting area. We were kind of floaty and attached to things, and so we're going to kind of find out exactly what's going on because we found our grandfather in the last episode, and our grandmother is now with us. So, we're going to find out what's going on. Chapter 15, Family Reunion. When Grandpa turned, when Grandma finally saw his face, she started to cry. They weren't real tears, of course, since we weren't actually in our bodies, but still, you could tell she was crying by the way her mouth trembled and her shoulders shook. As for Grandpa, he looked odd. He had a lot of expressions moving across his face. Things that looked like surprises, happiness, anger, joy, even fear. The really weird thing was that his face was no longer old, the way it had been the last time I'd seen him. But it wasn't young either. It was as if all the ages he had ever been, all the faces he had worn through the years, had combined somehow. His wrinkles were gone, but his eyes were old and wise. He was also transparent. That didn't seem that odd since we were too. But unlike us, he had no silver cord leading back to his body, no thread connecting him to the world of the living. He stared at us for a long time. "You're not dead," he said at last, his voice puzzled, worried, and relieved all at once. "Well, of course not, Horace," said Grandma matter-of-factly. I was surprised that she could hear him, since he had barely spoken above a whisper, and she was nearly deaf. Then I realized her deafness was part of her physical body, and we had left those behind when we entered the land of the dead. "What are you doing here?" he asked. "And with the children, you shouldn't have come, Ethel." "We had to come, sir," said Gaspar. Grandpa turned toward him. His eyes grew wide. "Gaspar?" he said slowly, and beneath the astonishment I could sense a hint of anger in his voice. "Gaspar Morley? And can it be? Melisande," he said, her name with something like a sob. "But you're no older than when... But you're not dead, either. How can... Ethel, what's going on here? What are you doing here with them?" "It's a long story," said Gaspar. Grandpa gestured to the misty void surrounding us. "If there's one thing I've got, it's time." "Actually, that may not be entirely true," Gaspar replied. "The reason we dared this journey is to bring word to the dead that they are in danger." "Dead is dead," said Grandpa, sounding scornful. "Really?" asked Gaspar. "It's true that you are dead to the life you once knew, but though you no longer have your body, yourself still exists. Now that is in danger as well." Grandpa snorted. "You sound like Reverend Van Dyke. But don't worry, Gaspar. There's not much temptation around here. I don't think I'm in danger of any major sins at the moment." Gaspar's handsome face darkened with a scowl of frustration. "The danger is from outside, you old..." He cut himself off and took a deep breath. Then he closed his eyes. I had a feeling he was counting to 10, maybe higher. Finally he spoke again, sounding somewhat stiff and formal. "There exists a great and powerful alien race, a group without pity or mercy. These people, the Flinduvians, have found a way to use the souls of Earth's dead to power a weapon they have created. If they should take you, sir, the result would be a second death, a permanent one. A death not of the body, but of the soul itself. Or perhaps not. We really don't know what happens when a soul is used in this weapon of theirs. It could be far worse than a mere oblivion." Now Grandpa did look frightened. "You're joking," he whispered. "I did not travel all the way to the land of the dead for the sake of a prank," said Gaspar sharply. "Now, is there someone you can take us to, a leader of any sort in here?" "I never thought I'd hear someone say, 'Take me to your leader,' as a ghost," whispered Sarah. I never thought I'd make a trip to the land of the dead, I replied softly. Grandpa's face twisted into a familiar scowl. I recognized it as his thinking look. I don't believe there is really a leader in this place, he said, but I haven't been here all that long, so maybe there's something or someone I don't know about. Some souls greeted me when I arrived, helped calm me, keep me from being afraid, but since I've been pretty much on my own. What have you been doing, Grandpa? Sarah asked. Waiting, thinking, trying to let go. He glanced at my grandmother. It's hard, Ethel. I don't want to let go. Let go of what? Asked Sarah. We had both floated close to him, and now she reached out to take his hand. She couldn't really touch him, of course. Touch is for the living. Of the world, he said slowly. Of life. He turned to Grandma. Mostly, I didn't want to let go of you, my dear, but that's what I'm supposed to do, I guess. I'm not really supposed to be here. None of us is. We're supposed to move on. Well, I don't know exactly what. To something else, but I couldn't stop thinking about our life together. He looked at Gaspar again, then added bitterly, I didn't expect you to show up here with my old rival. Grandma smiled. Are you jealous, you old fool? She asked in her most loving voice. Jealous of the living, said Grandpa. Grandma stretched her hand toward him, but she couldn't touch him any more than Sarah could. I suspect that very jealousy would keep you here, if nothing else did, my love. You've got to let go, Horace, but not yet, not until this nightmare is over. She turned to me and said softly, This is a nightmare, isn't it, Anthony? I mean, I am only dreaming, right? I longed to be able to tell her that was the case, but Grandma was fierce about the truth and didn't like even the tiniest lies. Besides, who knew what else we were going to have to deal with before this was all over? If she thought this was a dream, it might lull her, make her less sharp, less ready to act, and that wasn't a luxury we could afford. So I shook my head. It's no dream, Grandma. She sighed. Oh, I knew that. It's just sort of hoping. Well, never mind. What do we do now, Gaspar? Gaspar looked uncertain, which was unusual for him. I guess we try and deliver our warning. After that, we go back to the world of the living to see if the others have returned from Flinduvia. Grandma turned back to Grandpa. Well, there it is, Horace. You have to help us deliver our warning. I can't take the children home until we do. She held out her arms and floated toward him. Gaspar gestured to the rest of the group, and we turned to give the two old people, one living and one dead, a few minutes to themselves. I used that time while Grandma and Grandpa were whispering to each other to get a better look at the place we were in. There wasn't much to see, or so I thought at first. It was gray and misty and seemed to roll on forever. Though it didn't have anything you could call landscape or scenery, I could get a sense of up and down, which was sort of weird. But we were all floating the same way up, as were the occasional dead people who drifted past. So I figured my sense of up and down was genuine. The ghosts, I guess that's what you would call them, pretty much ignored us. This was fine as far as I was concerned. The only time they looked our way was when Bob growled at them. I figured they weren't used to seeing a cocker spaniel in the land of the dead. Shush, whispered Melisande, you are disturbing them. Bob whimpered and floated against her side. I don't like it here, whispered Sarah, who was floating almost as close to my side as Bob was to Melisande. It feels cold. Gaspar nodded. It is not pleasant, but remember, this is not where you will spend eternity. This is a place for those who have not yet moved on. It's hard to have a sense of time in the land of the dead, so I don't really know how long it was before Gaspar made a noise in his throat to interrupt my grandparents. Grandpa looked startled, as if he had forgotten the rest of us were there. His voice, unusually gentle, Gaspar said, What would you suggest we do next, Horace? Grandpa looked at Gaspar for a long time. I don't know, he said at last. Is there no one to contact? Not that I can think of. They went back and forth like that a couple more times until I finally got sick of it. I don't know what came over me. I had just had enough. I guess, anyway, I threw my head back and yelled, Help! We need to talk to someone. Who's in charge here anyway? The silence that followed my outburst was broken when Melisande started to laugh. It was a rich, beautiful sound, and it was like bait. Chapter 16. Ivanoma. At the sound of Melisandre's laugh, tinkled and chimed through the mist, I saw the ghosts around us stop their slow drifting. They turned and began to move toward us. Within moments we were surrounded by dozens of translucent men and women, and a few children, all staring at Melisandre with a look I can only describe as hunger. Laughter is something you don't hear much of in these parts, explained Grandpa softly. Melisandre looked nervous, but I figured this was our big chance. Listen, everyone, I said. We've got a problem. Is there anyone in this place we can talk to? Anyone who's sort of in charge? The dead people glanced at one another. Finally, a sad-eyed woman in an old-fashioned dress said, No one is in charge here. Perhaps you could talk to Ivanoma. Who's that? I asked. I was a little surprised that the grown-ups were letting me carry the conversation, but I guess they figured I had started it, and unless I made some mistakes, they'd let me keep it going. Ivanoma is it's sort of a counselor, said the woman. It? I asked. Ivanoma is too... The dead woman paused, then said slowly, Well, it's too much to be a mere he or she. The others murmured in agreement. Don't look at me, said Grandpa, when we all turned in his direction. I've never heard this Ivanoma, whatever it is. How do we find our way back to this muchness of a being? Asked Gaspar. The woman looked at our silver cords, then said hesitantly, I'm not sure you should go that far. That made me nervous. If there was one thing I didn't want to do, it was break the connection that held me to my body. The cords will hold, said Gaspar confidently. Melisandre leaned over. I hope brother knows what he's talking about, she whispered in my ear. I looked at her in horror, but before I could say anything, the woman who had mentioned Ivanoma said, Follow me. To travel in the land of the dead is strange. At first I thought there was little to mark the passing of distance, because everything looks the same. But as we moved on, I began to see vague hints of the world of the living. There were little more shapes in the mist, different shades and tones in the gray, like the images you sometimes get when your TV isn't tuned in well. The difference now was that it was all very real. I realized we were moving very fast. I began to worry even more about the silver cords. How far could they stretch? Suddenly, we plunged downward. Below us stretched a great lake of ice. Chained flat on its back in the center of the lake was the most beautiful creature I had ever seen. It was shaped like a human, but it was enormous, maybe 100 feet long. Vast, perfect-formed wings stretched from its shoulders across the clear ice. Its face was calm and noble, with a broad, high brow and a mouth that seemed to be just on the verge of a frown on one side, just on the verge of a smile on the other. The sight of it made my heart ache with a longing to coax that smile into bloom. That being, I assumed it was Ivanoma, lay very still, staring upwards into the mist and the darkness. Clusters of the dead surrounded it, leaning against its sides, floating around its huge and magnificent head, resting on its breast. From its beautiful eyes flowed a never-ending stream of tears. Some of the dead were bathing in them. I felt fear and awe and pity as we sank towards the creature. Suddenly, Ivanoma blinked and lifted its head. Then it raised one vast and shapely arm. As it did, the chains that held to the ice separated as if they were made of nothing but mist, though they had looked as solid as steel just a moment earlier. Why have the living come to the land of the dead? It asked in a whisper that had many tones, as much music as a choir. As it spoke, it held out its hands in a clear invitation for us to land upon it. So we did. Though our bodies were not really there, though we were in truth lighter than air, I could see the great being flinch as we touched it. The palm of its hand sank as if a great weight had just been dropped into it. We stood in the center of Ivanoma's hand, and it lowered us to hold us right before its eyes. Its eyes. If I had 100 years, I couldn't tell you what it meant to look into those eyes, except to say that it was like drowning in pain and beauty, and I was afraid I might never be able to look at the regular world, at anything else again. My mother told me once that the memory of pain fades. She said if it didn't, women would never have more than one baby. I think that must be true for other things as well, things like beauty and love. If the memory of gazing into those eyes, each of which had a yard wide and several thousand miles deep, had not faded, I doubt I could move in the world today. I would only sit and remember. For a long time none of us spoke. Finally it was Sarah, the question machine, who asked, "Are you Ivanoma?" The vast being nodded. "Are you an angel?" I asked. It nodded again. "Why are you here? Why are you so sad?" None of this is what we had come to say, but it was all that I could think of. "I made a mistake once," whispered the angel in a voice that would have made Mozart weep with envy because he could never write music that beautiful. "I chose the wrong side in an ancient war. I am paying for my sin." "But your chains don't hold you," I said, thinking of how it had lifted its hand to receive us. Ivanoma actually smiled, and I thought that I would die of joy on the spot. "My chains are of my own making, and I can break them at any time. I choose to be here, to console the dead, to offer them help and guidance and love when they are ready to receive it." I saw Grandma nudge Grandpa as if to say, "You should have taken advantage of this, you old fool." "The dead need your help now," I said. Ivanoma raised a single eyebrow. The gesture was like a sunrise. Quickly I told the angel what we knew about the Flinduvians. Its frown nearly killed me. "I know this to be true," it whispered in a voice that throbbed with pain, as if it held the weight of 10,000 years of human misery. "I have sensed 5 times in the last moments. You must understand. Moments are different to me than they are to you. I have sensed 5 times someone being wrenched from the land of the dead, heard a cry of terror, felt a stab of fear that was different from the fear I feel when they enter here. I did not know what it meant." "Can you help?" I cried. "I can warn the dead," Ivanoma replied. "Surely you can do more than that," I said urgently. "You are so strong, so powerful." "I am bound," replied Ivanova. "But you can break the chains." "I have promised not to." All that really and that was all I would say. It was all we had come for, really. We wanted to warn the dead. Ivanoma said it would do that for us. Our mission was accomplished. But still. "Come," whispered Gaspar, "it is time for us to leave." He might as well have said it was time to rip my heart out of my chest and drop it still beating into the dog dish. "Leave?" I cried. "We can't leave." "You must," whispered Ivanoma. "The living do not belong here. It was brave of you to come, but you must go back where you belong. Let me warn the dead. You tend to the living." The angel closed its eyes and laid its head back against the frozen lake. It was like being released from a trap you didn't know was holding you. I could never have left the land of the dead as long as I was looking into those eyes. Now I was free to go. And we did go, almost instantly, for in that space of less than a heartbeat, we were back in our bodies, back in the world of the living. It was clear that Ivanoma had hurried us on our way. And it was also soon clear that the angel had made another mistake. All right, that was chapters 15 and 16. We will read 17 and 18 next time and find out exactly what mistake the angel made. See you guys next time.